So when you come into your tack room, you'll see an array of bits on the wall, and it's very hard to know which is exactly the right bit for your horse. Let's think back to our 16-2 stallion that we were looking at, and he was unhappy with the loose ring bit. So I've picked 3 different bits down from the wall here to have a think about them before we go any further. The first one I've picked out is a simple straight bar snaffle. It's an egg butt which should be fairly flexible on the side, but I find this bit gives you very little riding feel because there's no joint, there's no movement to the bit in the horse's mouth. So I would say this bit would be a no. But perhaps he might like to go in either of these bits. There's a D-ring snaffle or an egg butt snaffle. And I would have looked at these 2 bits. The D-ring you can see is a very fat bit on either side. It's quite short in the mouthpiece. But what do you think about this thickness of bit inside our horse's mouth? I would say no, it's too thick. Remember, if the bit doesn't fit comfortably inside the horse's mouth, resting comfortably on his tongue and giving enough room for the roof of his mouth, he's not going to find it easy to stay relaxed and keep his mouth happily closed around the bit. So again, I think this bit would be slightly too thick for him. Here we have a D snaffle. It's very small, it's perhaps a little bit too small for that horse, but you can see that it's fairly thin on the sides here, and yet the D is going to be smooth against the corners of his mouth. Perhaps it would be worth trying a D snaffle on him or a thinner egg butt. Let's see what else we have on the wall that might work. We have some other bits. It's a bit like trying to find a pair of shoes to fit it, doesn't it? But it's, you know, it's worth spending the time experimenting with different bits to see what actually fits. Again, we're only talking snaffles. Let's compare our 2 egg butts. This is very small, it's only a 4 1/4, which would be a pony bit, but it's much thinner on the edges than our other egg butts. So here we have 2 egg butt snaffles, but very different in the shape of the inside of the bit to fit our horse's mouth. I was asked about a French link, or something with a plate in the centre. The difficulty with the long plate here, like the Dr. Bristol, is that because the horse has a fairly thick tongue, fairly thick bars and some damaged scar tissue on the inside of his lips, you may find that this outer edge actually pinches his tongue against the bars of his mouth. So although we don't have the nutcracker action, we have more play with this bit, which is very nice. It may just be a little bit too long, this plate, for that particular horse. Another bit that we looked at here was the twisted snaffle. It's thicker at the side. It's quite a slow twist on it, so it's not a particularly severe twisted snaffle, but with a twist at all, it is going to rub against the bars of the mouth, so it would be a more severe bit than our regular egg butt snaffle. We've taken a shorter link, a smaller link in the centre of this bit, and if you can see from the side, this link is curved a little bit and is going to give a little bit of pressure on the roof of the mouth, particularly if the roof of the mouth is very low, and it's going to give quite a lot of room for the horse's tongue. So this bit might be quite a nice bit in our horse's mouth in that it's fairly short, it's not going to catch him on the inside here, there's room for his tongue, and there's going to be a little bit of action on the roof of his mouth. So this one would be one that I would suggest keeping. Some tack shops will actually loan you bits out. They have a box of bits to loan out and you can experiment. Or you could ask a friend once you've made a reasonable decision as to 1 or 2 that might fit. The last of the snaffle families that I really like is what's called a hanging snaffle. And I've used this bit myself on horses going cross-country. I like it because the mouthpiece is not too thick. There's room for the horse's tongue. It's a very simple bit inside the horse's mouth. There's no pain there's no pain caused by this bit, but because the cheek pieces are attached to these hooks, what happens as you give a rein aid, you actually get a little bit of pull pressure. And I can remember the first time I used this bit was on a horse going cross-country, and he was fairly fast cross-country, and I needed him to be able to take a half halt and slow down quickly enough after a fence without losing any time. So I put this bit in, and I can remember him coming down off a bank, giving one half halt on this rein, him immediately coming back and being able to continue on a rolling stride to a coffin. So it was a very smooth round with no fight